Okay, so I am thrilled to be joined by former Buckeye and NFL-er, I'm going to use that term, I'm going to use Bobby Carpenter. Bobby, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well, RJ. How you doing, sir?
I'm good, man. I wanted to talk with you for a number of reasons, but not the least of which is you graded a statement, or an open letter from Kevin Warren. And I thought it was one of the funniest things that I had seen out of all of this that has transpired over the last 6 weeks. So first I got to ask, what is your degree in, and are you trying to become an English teacher? Is that what you're doing?
English is probably the worst thing that I do. My wife is a communications major, so she always proofreads all my stuff and takes a look at all of that. I was econ undergrad and a finance MBA, so we would do some redlining. I took some law classes when I was getting my MBA, so learned about redlining and our notes and all that different stuff as I do that. But no, I'm by no means an English scholar by any stretch.
Well, you were one of the folks that was from jump stumping for why did you change this decision? What changed between now and then, quite honestly, especially knowing that they were returning kids to campus and that the rest of the country seemed to be playing football, to say nothing of nearly the entire state of Ohio. You seem to have one train of thought on this that everybody else seemed to come on board with later. Why did you believe it was the right decision to play right away?
Well, I didn't necessarily believe it was the right decision to play right away. The thought of canceling the season to me at that point in time seemed very premature. I didn't think that there was enough evidence to prove that it couldn't be done safely. And I thought that there was enough time that you could always truncate the schedule and continue to move forward and continue to evaluate new information as it came aboard and became readily available. Had the Big Ten chose to do that, they may have been able to play, more of a 9 or 10 game traditional schedule because they wouldn't have to stop and then restart. They could have had potentially a bye week in there or kept it at 8 games, and maybe 2 byes, and to make sure that they had room for error in case something should happen. And so it wasn't necessarily, they should just go ahead and forge on and play, and disregard all safety protocols. You looked at the numbers in the conference. I mean, Michigan was having 0 positives. Ohio State only had a handful. Like most of these schools were doing a very good job, and they were asking their student athletes to, not go out, not integrate into the communities, refrain from social activities, which college kids, including myself when I was that age, loved to be a part of. And they were making all their sacrifices, and then you didn't even really try for them. And in a letter that you just put out there, outside of, a lot of things that contradicted some of the other statements that have been made by presidents and even maybe potentially by Kevin Warren earlier, it was the fact that there was no quantifiable data in there. There was no reason as to why it was canceled. Like, rate was this, or this was too high, or that's happened, this is too high. And then the postponement, there was no quantifiable data of where you needed to get to in order to say, hey, once we get below these levels, then we think we can safely proceed. And so those two things were void, and the only thing that was referenced was an overall global pandemic. I'm a compassionate person, and I want to help the world and help every other parts of the country and all these things, but the only thing that Kevin Warren and the presidents should be judging this on is their footprint of where their schools are located and how everything is going on there. And so I just, for the life of me, I could not, piece this together of why this was happening and why they were making these decisions, which, I thought were kind of rash at the time.
Well, they apparently have heard somebody give them some new information, and daily testing seems to be a big part of it. But I read the protocols, man, and I don't know, dude. It doesn't feel like those give a lot of leeway for anybody to make just have a rash of cases. Like, as an example, I'm looking at that 5% and that 7.5%, the team positivity and whatever the overall positivity is supposed to be. I don't know who they're counting in that statistic.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's a problem for me. Like, team positivity I get, but also are you including support staff and coaches, or are you just including the kids on the roster? And then, not having hard and fast rules about how many is how many, right? Like, I'll use an example. The Big 12 has said 53 players, right? Not on like an NFL roster, which gives a lot of leeway because Oklahoma played a game against Missouri State where they had a bunch of kids out due to contact tracing, but they were able to play. How do you feel about these medical protocols? Do you think that they are within reason?
Whether they're in reason or not, or reasonable or not, I could argue that doesn't even matter at this point because they're at least given a chance. they're a bit excessive. The 21 days, like, okay, it's a 14-day quarantine. Myself, knowing this, like, I don't need a 7-day acclimation period coming back from that. Give me the cardiac MRI and let's go play. And if everything passes, like, I'll be the one that's able to determine my level of physical fitness of whether or not I'm going to go out there and be able to handle it. I don't need, you to tell me that I need 7 days for that. Like, you're talking about guys that are, 18, 19, up to 22, 23 years old, like, played a lot of football. They played a lot of sports. They understand where they're at and if they would be able to go. And, especially the degree of which they had, if they were asymptomatic for 14 days, like, I don't think you need a 7-day acclimation period to get accustomed to playing football again. So that's a little ridiculous. Like you said, the positivity rates, those things are a little steep, and there's a lot of ambiguity in there. But, I've done probably 10 interviews in the last day and change in 24 hours. And, and you laugh about that. I mean, it's probably in the last, since 9 o'clock yesterday. This is probably the 10th time I've talked to somebody about this outside of my show. And at least you have something to complain about. If there was no season and they weren't even trying, that's the thing that I was the most frustrated with, is to give the kids a chance, give them an opportunity. And so they're doing that. It may be a little strict and it could be a little ridiculous, but at least you're getting the chance for these kids to try. And I think that they'll be able to do a good job with it.
Well, number one, thank you for not blowing me off, because good God, I can only imagine. I do these segments on YouTube and there's 4 a day and I can only, no, where I'm talking about the same damn thing. No. All right. Thanks for that. So let's get into the schedule. How do you feel about the schedule and how they're choosing to do this? I'm thinking about not having a bye week. That's what bothers me. It's not even the COVID stuff. It's just, you're going to ask the kids to do this without a break. And cool, they want to play, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, they played, 8 straight games. Greater things have been overcome in the history of man than playing football for 8 straight weeks. In 2002, I was my freshman year at Ohio State. We won a national championship. We played in the Kickoff Classic, and then we had a bye week 2, and then we played 12 straight games. That's just what it was. I mean, you didn't think twice about it. The only reason that no bye week bothers me is you give yourself no room for error should you have to delay or postpone a game. When are you going to make it up? And so then you're going to have to be comfortable with some teams playing, a game or 2 less than other schools. That could end up being the reality. And are you okay with that? I mean, they painted themselves into a corner by dilly-dallying and waiting so long to make this decision that, if you want to give coaches a month, which I think 3 weeks would have been sufficient, that would have been fine to proceed that way. But the fact that, they ended up waiting this long, they wanted to have enough time. And so you gave yourself, essentially 8 games in 8 weeks within a championship weekend.
So you brought up winning the national championship in 2002. And I got to tell you, man, I was on the other side of that discussion. I could not stand you. I was watching you come downhill and I'm going, wait a second. I thought my team was the team that's supposed to win this. And thinking about how good those teams were and getting an appreciation for Ohio State football and what the pro team is actually in Ohio, as there are 2. How did you end up at Ohio State?
I'm actually from right outside of Ohio, or right outside of Columbus. I grew up in Lancaster. Mm-hmm. Both of my parents are from there. We moved around when my dad was playing when I was younger. I was born in Houston, but really since I was about 5, 6 years old, we lived, no more than about an hour from Columbus. And then, when I was older, probably about 40 minutes. And, that's where my mom went to school. And, I had 3 younger brothers. My dad was still coaching high school ball. I wanted to try to get back and see them as much as possible. And I really liked Jim Tressel. We had a great recruiting class. And seeing guys, like Maurice Claret and different guys like that committing, I'm like, man, we got a really good team. A lot of Ohio guys on that roster, and it was cool. It was a great experience, and I made some of my best friends for life. And so it was definitely the right decision for me. And if I looked back on it, over the prism of 20 years, would you still make the same choice? And without hesitation, I would say I would.
What do you think the toughest thing about being a newcomer to Ohio State is? And I ask that knowing that the day we're recording this is a day later from Trey Sermon having his black stripe removed. And I just learned about that tradition at Ohio State because, of course, he played at Oklahoma. That's the team that I follow the closest. And I wonder, since it's such a big deal, how hard is it to be a freshman or a transfer to that program?
Anytime you transfer income in someplace new, I mean, you're learning the campus, you're learning, your class schedule, trying to get around. I think it's different, about Ohio State than probably most college campuses. It's really big. It gets sprawling and spread out. And so, to really get around and to get to the athletic portion of the campus from, the more traditional academic portion, you need to almost have to have a car. And so it's, how do you get there? If you don't have a vehicle, who are you getting to drive you? And you have to kind of understand that. I was right on the edge of text or of cell phones. You could call people. Texting really wasn't an option. So now it's easy to text and do all that stuff. To figure it out, and the young guys take care of the old guys, and heck, they have Uber to get them over there. So all that stuff I could see being hard, for Trey coming in from Oklahoma, and it's a campus of 60,000 people. Like, it's massive, and so it's not for everybody, and it's a little bit different. And when you're a freshman, I mean, it's definitely overwhelming, just walking around and trying to figure out how I'm going to get from point A to point B, from building to building, and then get over for practice in time. And they have food there now. They have an unbelievable cafeteria. We didn't have any of that, and so they've all added those things. But it was, all right, I've got class here till 11:18. I got to get food, got to get dressed, I got to teach, I got to get ready. We have meetings at 1. And so it doesn't sound like, it sounds like you have plenty of time, but heck, if you got to walk 15 minutes to get to your car, to drive 10 minutes over there, get food in between, I mean, it's all of a sudden a lot of that time gets gobbled up. And so it can be overwhelming at first. And it was definitely a transition of epic proportion, especially with the amount of talent that was here and how competitive it was. But it was good. You learn to deal with it because that's all you know.
What was the acclimation period like for you at practice? As in, when did you know that this wasn't going to be as easy or it was going to be harder than you expected it to be?
Oh, I knew that day one. I mean, I came up and everybody, a lot of guys enroll early and then everybody comes in the summer now. Well, AJ Hawk and myself were two of the first guys that started doing that. We came in the summer. And so he was staying here with his high school teammate, Mike Nugent. I would drive up every day and, we'd work out and, kind of go that way. But it was tough. Like, and I realized that right away. I'm like, gosh, these guys are all really good. And then Maurice Clarett had enrolled early, and I'm like, my goodness, this dude's a monster. Like, I don't know. I told my dad, I don't know if this is the place for me. Maybe I should have went someplace smaller. So just give yourself time. You'll adapt. You'll figure it out. You get better. You get stronger. You become more mature, and all those things kind of even themselves out. But it was definitely, a little overwhelming the first couple weeks.
Allow me to just read a few of the names off of that O2 roster because a lot of the people that listen to this are kids, and they're frankly my age, right? So I'm 14, give or take 2001. So you mentioned Maurice Clarett and Mike Nugent, who was one of the better kickers in college football history, but also Craig Krenzel back there and making it happen in a way that I was like, how is this dude running on people? Will Smith at defensive end. You mentioned AJ Hawk being in that linebacker room. I'm looking at this roster and I see Mike D'Antonio is the defensive coordinator, and I gotta ask, like, do you have a Mark D'Antonio story? Do you have one of those where he's just steely and jawed? Because I don't ever see the dude smile ever.
Oh yeah, it's funny. I mean, he came to our wedding, and it's funny. And he's my brother ended up marrying his daughter, so he's kind of family now. He's from Zanesville. My dad played against him in high school. He's not the warmest and fuzziest guy around. We used to always joke with him about that as we got a little older. But he comes to our wedding, and he was at a Michigan State basketball game, got there a little late with his wife, Becky. And they come in, and my wife, goes up and talks to him, introduces, and she looks at him. She's like, I don't know if I've ever seen you smile before. And his wife kind of hits him in the side, like laughs about it. And she's like, I always tell him to smile more. And, it's funny because he just looks so miserable all the time when he's coaching football, and he always tells everyone he loves it. I'm like, well, if you love it, then why do you always look so miserable while you're doing it? He's like, this is the only way that I know. So, it's just who he was. But he was a great coach. He was honest. He was fair. Very tough to play for, but he definitely helped my development immensely.
What about playing in the NFL is more difficult than we can see from watching it on television or even watching it from the stands?
Just the size and the speed. I mean, unless you're literally on field level, things look slow. I caught myself the other day. I'm like, gosh, how did he not make that play? And then I rewinded. I'm like, yeah, everything looks slower on TV. Remember that. Like, you were there before. Everything looks slower, and these guys are massive. They are massive human beings that can move really fast. And so you don't truly appreciate it until you are right there on the sideline, and you can see how fast and how large all of the human beings are. Like it's almost like a Marvel comic. Like I don't know, there's no superheroes in the world that I know of, but I'm like the closest thing you get to it is watching some of these high level professional athletes because God didn't make very many people that are like the people on that field.
Yeah, man. Like, I got a buddy he lives here in Tulsa, and he played for 10 years for the Buffalo Bills as a guard, and his kid is 6'2", 245, and chiseled from granite. And I said, "Do you know that you're bigger now than Steve Rogers was when he took the super serum? Do you know that?" And he giggles at me, but that's all of the dudes in the NFL. So I'm with you on the Marvel superheroes there. Okay, so you mentioned a master's in finance, a degree in economics. The hell are you doing daily radio for, Bobby?
Oh, I kind of the water they say finds the lowest point, so I guess that's where I've kind of sunk to. Um, when I started doing radio, and I did a lot of media when I was playing, and my dad always used to push me. He's like, try a lot of things, man. He goes, who knows what you'll end up wanting to do, and he kind of pushed me into that a little bit, and so I started experiencing. I was doing it while I was in grad school, and just kind of fell into it as a career, and now heck, I've been doing it for 7, almost 8 years. Started doing some stuff with ESPN, which was nice, and all the while trying to do some different business stuff. And I started teaching at Ohio State a couple of years ago, and so I just tried to do a lot of things to keep it interesting. And I like variety. I like having options because I joke with people like one day if I decide there's something I don't want to do, hopefully I have other things lined up that I can just cut that piece out and then quit it and start doing something else. And so that's what I've kind of tried to do my whole life, and work the family in there around all of it, and you kind of stir it into this big pot of stew and hope that it all works. And some days it tastes better than others, but it is what you got.
Amen to that. How's teaching? How are you taking to that?
It's been good. I mean, my students are really good, and the virtual stuff isn't really some of the guys who I teach with, and one guy in particular, he's like, you're really good at this stuff. He's like, you do TV. I'm like, yeah, maybe, but I don't really enjoy it. Like I enjoy the interaction with the students. It keeps you young. I try to make pop culture references from my time to see if they get them, and then I'll try to make them from their time to see if they can still laugh at it, and to let them know like that I kind of am aware of what's going on, and I'm probably the youngest guy that they'll have teaching. So I like to think that I'm the cool teacher, even though I'm probably not. But it's fun. Like it's just another thing to do that is exciting, and to build out a class and to work through it, and to watch give these students real world advice. And a lot of it's it's just learning from my mistakes and teaching them different things of, hey, this is what it says in the textbook. This is how I thought it went, and this is how it actually went. So learn that in life so you can be better off than I am.
What are you teaching?
So it's a private equity finance class.
Okay, give me the course description.
So it's a little bit of deal sourcing, raising of capital, and then structuring of deals and how all that works and the financing of it. And we get into a little bit of the contracts and the PPMs, private placement memorandums, and how all that works. So it's a lot of things that I kind of do on the side already. And when it was broached to me about having the opportunity to do that, I'm like, sure, like that sounds cool, and I'll just give them some real world experiences and go through cases and read companies of how they end up merging, or they're bought by some big private capital group, and they'll do roll ups, buy a bunch of companies in the same industry, and end up selling them off and doing different stuff. So it's kind of the function of how those things operate and the financial modeling that goes behind it.
That stuff's fascinating to me, especially now in the age that we live in, because I'm looking at real estate, for instance, and I have some friends that work in it in Oklahoma. It's booming, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, why are people wanting to buy houses? Why are people paying $10,000 more for a house than they might have, say, 2 years ago? Or why are mortgage interest rates so low? And then looking at some of these businesses that are thinking of buying each other, I get really intrigued with that. So that also leads me to ask, how'd you make it through Ohio State with such a course load? I mean, if you're going to play in the NFL, multidisciplinary is on the table. General studies is on the table, but you chose to truly challenge yourself. Yeah.
Coach, I don't know about Oklahoma, but they don't have general studies at Ohio State. So you actually kind of have to go to school a little bit and find some major that work. And I always joke with people that they have that. I'm like, hey, interdisciplinary studies, like taking a bunch of classes that that might be good in exploring and finding yourself, but what are you really good at? at the end. So I tried to find something that would challenge myself. Heck, when you get to college, guys may think they're going to play in the NFL, but you have no idea. There's some players I played with who were great when I got here that, didn't really have the careers they want. And my dad told me, he played for 10 years. He's like, there'll be a day where you'll be done. You'll still be a young man. You have to find something to do that you enjoy. And so take school seriously, because that's kind of the time for you to find out what that is, because you don't want to be exploring that, when you're, 34, 35 years old, kind of wandering around. And it's tough enough to kind of transition as it is. So finding something that you like, that you're passionate about, that you can do well, I think it's important to take school seriously. And so I'm not trying to say that I took it as seriously as I should have. I mean, I got grades good enough that my mom wasn't on my back, and, I was probably out, partying a bit too much, but, I still did make sure that I understood what I was doing and tried to graduate with a meaningful degree.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you just a couple of questions about this 2021 recruiting class, because
Sure.
I've been very excited about it. From basically March on, when Travion Henderson decided to commit without actually taking a visit, who are the guys that you are most excited about?
Well, you mentioned Reed Carrico, and I always enjoyed the linebackers. Number one, that's what I played, and then guys from Ohio, even better. Guys from like Central or Southern Ohio, probably the most, because those guys are that's kind of where I'm from, and so I enjoy it. I kind of feel a connection to them, and so I've gotten fortunate enough to kind of get to know Reed a little bit. He's from right down the road from where my wife is, about 20 minutes, right on the river there. So, it's been cool to kind of see him. Jack Sawyer, who I think is one of the top committed guys in the class. He's from Pickerington North. It's in the division that I played in high school. My dad, I've got to see him and coach against him, help my dad, a bunch. He's a really good dude, really good player. I've enjoyed getting a chance to see him. Kyle McCord, the quarterback in the class from Philly, is really good. Super excited to kind of see what he can do, because people are saying that he's supposed to be, the next big thing. And you always have great players at Ohio State, and stars don't necessarily mean a ton, but just from what I've heard and what I've seen, it's pretty exciting. And then Marvin Harrison Jr. is a really exciting guy too. My man Anthony Gonzalez played for the Colts. There's a connection there with Marvin Harrison, obviously being there, and he went to Syracuse. But his son's a big dude, pretty physical receiver. And, I've heard a lot of things about him. And so it's been weird. Usually I get a chance to interact with the recruits a little more and help meet guys and bring them in. But, during this time, it's been, so distant that, they haven't brought me in to kind of meet with some of these guys, because I can talk to them about the business aspect of Ohio State and the school, and talk to them about getting the media if that's what they want to do. And so, those are, 3-4 guys. And you mentioned, Travion Henderson. I mean, he's obviously a great player, running back, committing early. That sounds fantastic. I'm just excited to get a chance to meet him, because a lot of these times these guys are coming through right now, and it's been on pause and been on hold. So this is a year kind of unlike any other.
Yeah, man, and that's also been interesting for me, because a lot of the stuff that I end up doing with them is via text or in phone calls, and hearing how they're coping, hearing how they're trying to get through this very difficult time where, like, guys like Travion, they're not going to get to play football for a calendar year, and it sucks, because, I mean, he's really good, and he deserves every opportunity to enjoy his senior year. I wanted to ask you just one more question before I let you go, and that was the one that I give to most folks that are in your position, having played big-time college football and played for twice as long as the normal career in the NFL. What piece of advice would you be willing to give to parents of high school football players and high school football players themselves?
I'm just probably enjoy high school. I mean, it's as you increase levels, there's a level of pressure and like level of seriousness and professionalism that increases each and every step. In college football, yeah, you're amateurs, but it's still big business. And if something happens, you miss a tackle, you miss a catch, you throw an interception. I mean, there's a lot that's being thrown at you then, on social media and publicly, and those things. They burn a little bit. Now, you'll develop calluses and thick skin, and it won't bother you as much at the end as it does at the beginning. But, in college, you live with the guys and you play with them. In the NFL, you just play together and you have a couple friends you hang out with. And, heck, I mean, there's guys that are, when I got to Dallas, I mean, I'm talking to guys, after walkthrough, they were rushing out of there to go watch their kid's soccer game or their flag football game or whatever. And I'm like, hey, man, I'm going to go hit a nap. And my wife and I are going to go get lunch because we didn't have any kids yet. And so just at different points in life. In high school, in theory, if you've lived in the same area, and I was fortunate to kind of go to the same school, K through 12, I was getting to play with a lot of my best friends since I was, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. Some you meet along the way. Like, these are the guys that you've worked with, you played not just football, but multiple sports with. And so just enjoy it. Like, take it seriously, work really hard, have fun. But, understand and appreciate that this is pure a part of the game as you're probably ever going to have.
That is Bobby Carpenter, played for 7 years in the NFL, graduated twice from Ohio State, played on a national championship football team, and co-host the Morning Juice from 6 to 9 a.m. right there in Columbus at the Fan. Bobby, thanks so much, man. I sincerely appreciate this.
No, my pleasure, man. Glad to help out, and love to talk again sometime.
Right on. Hey, dude, you say the word.